I'm Prayasha, a cloud support engineer here at the AWS office in Bangalore. Today I'm going to show you how users can use Amazon CloudFront to serve their static website hosted on S3. Let's get started. In this video, I'm going to show 3 ways to serve a static website hosted on Amazon Simple Storage Service. You can deploy a CloudFront distribution using one of these configurations based on your use case. The first way is using REST API endpoint as the origin with access restricted by an OAI. For this, log into your S3 console. Create a bucket and then upload the website files. For this video, I have already uploaded the sample index.html and error.html files. For CloudFront distribution creation, go to the CloudFront console. Choose Create a Distribution. In Origin Domain option, select the bucket that you created. For S3 bucket access, select Yes, use OAI. This way, the bucket can restrict the access to only CloudFront. For origin access identity, select Create new OAI. Then enter the OAI name and choose Create. For bucket policy, select Yes, update the bucket policy. If you want to associate custom domain name with your CloudFront distribution, then you must select Custom SSL certificate. Select the certificate from the drop-down list that covers your custom domain. If you do not have certificate, you can choose Request Certificate. Doing this takes you to AWS Certificate Manager to get a new certificate. Provide your custom domain in alternate domain name. If you don't want to use any custom domain, you can skip the steps to add certificate and a domain name. Create distribution and wait for it to be fully deployed. Update the DNS records for your domain to point your website's CNAME to your CloudFront distribution's domain name. You can find your distribution's domain name in the CloudFront console in the format that is similar to D1234's abcd.cloudfront.net. I have already pointed my custom domain's CNAME DNS record to my CloudFront distribution's domain name. You can now validate your configuration by accessing your custom domain name or CloudFront distribution domain name. The second way is using a website endpoint as the origin with anonymous or public access allowed. Note that when you use Amazon S3 static website endpoint, connections between CloudFront and Amazon S3 are available only over HTTP. To use HTTPS connections between CloudFront and Amazon S3, configure an S3 REST API endpoint for your origin. For this method, first we must create an S3 website endpoint for our bucket. I will use the same bucket that I created earlier. Go to the S3 console and then choose your bucket. Select the Properties tab. Scroll down to the Static Website Hosting section. Note that the S3 website endpoint is different than the REST API endpoint of S3. For more details, choose Learn More. This document also covers the key differences between the two endpoints. Choose Enable and select Host a Static Website option. Provide the object names of your index and error documents. Save the changes. From the Static Website Hosting dialog box, copy the endpoint of your bucket without leading HTTP. You will use this in later steps. Add a bucket policy that allows public read access to the bucket that you created. Note that for this configuration, the S3 bucket's block public access settings must be disabled. If your use case requires the block public access settings to be enabled, then use the REST API method described in earlier section. For CloudFront distribution creation, go to CloudFront console, choose Create Distribution. For origin domain, paste the S3 website endpoint that you copied earlier. Be sure not to select S3 bucket name from drop-down list because you will be using the REST endpoint. The remainder of the CloudFront configuration can be used as described in earlier section. Update the DNS records for your domain to point your website's CNAME to CloudFront Distribution's domain name. You can find your distribution's domain name in the CloudFront console in the format that is similar to D1234 abcd.cloudfront.net. I have already pointed my custom domain's CNAME DNS record to the CloudFront distribution domain name. You can now validate your configuration by accessing your custom domain or your CloudFront distribution's domain name. The third way is using website endpoint as the origin, with access restricted by a referrer header. In second method, we allowed public read access to S3 bucket, which implies that anyone can directly access S3 bucket endpoints without CloudFront. To allow only CloudFront to access the content, we can use this method. In this method, we are going to use a secret referrer header value that's passed by CloudFront to S3. Update the bucket policy so that it only allows requests that contain the specific referrer header value. Go to S3 console and enable static website hosting as explained in the second method. Copy the endpoint. You will use this in later steps. For CloudFront distribution creation, go to CloudFront console. Choose Create Distribution. For the origin domain, paste the S3 website endpoint that you copied earlier. Under Add Custom Header, choose Add Header. For header name, enter referrer. For value, enter custom header value that you want to forward to origin, which is S3 bucket. To restrict access to the origin, enter a random or a secret value that only you know. The remainder of the CloudFront configuration can be used as described in earlier sections. Choose Create Distribution. Open your website's bucket from S3 console. Then add a bucket policy that allows S3 get object permission on the condition that the request includes the custom referrer header that you specified in earlier step. For this configuration, the S3 bucket's block public access settings must be disabled. Amazon S3 considers a bucket policy that grants anonymous access restricted by a referrer to be public. To block access for any request that doesn't include custom referrer header, you can use an explicit deny statement in the bucket policy. As mentioned earlier, if your use case requires the block public access settings to be enabled, then consider using REST API endpoint as an origin for CloudFront. Update the DNS record for your domain to point your website's CNAME to your CloudFront distribution's domain name. You can now validate your configuration by accessing your custom domain of CloudFront name or CloudFront distribution domain name. You can use AWS CloudFormation as well to deploy your website on CloudFront and S3. Find the link to deploy the solution by using CloudFormation in the article. Thanks for watching and happy cloud computing from all of us here at AWS.